So we're now going to go into our session on pathways to a more plant-based future. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Rens Voesnick, who is Professor of Plant Ecophysiology at Utrecht University. He studies the complex interactions between plants and their environment. And he's also the lead of Future Food Utrecht, which is one of the research hubs of the Pathways to Sustainability program. This is a platform for both researchers and external stakeholders so they can contribute to this transition to a food chain for a more sustainable world by means of this transdisciplinary research and activities that we've heard about. Their ambition is to strive for diets that are both good for the planet as well as of all of its inhabitants. He's a member of the program board for the Pathways to Sustainability, and he's going to introduce you to our speakers today. Rens. Yeah, oh, you can there. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for introducing me so kindly. We're going to talk about other diets. We're going to talk about plant-based diets. And I'm proud to introduce two excellent speakers in respect to that. But before, a few words from my side. We're talking about proteins. What are proteins? Proteins is actually a very simple chemical structure. It is a string of amino acids. And the sequence of all different amino acids determines the properties of such a protein and how it functions. And proteins are available in all our diets. Whatever we eat, there are proteins inside. Why do we need them? We need them for calories, and we need them to get those amino acids. And those amino acids we use in our body cells to make proteins again. And many of these proteins have important biochemical functions in our cells and make life possible. For instance, they can act as a sort of catalyst, speeding up certain biochemical reactions. Our daily protein intake can come from animals or it can come from plants. And that is the essence of the discussion that we're going to do today. The idea is that we should move further towards plant-based proteins because the carbon footprint of meat is enormous when you compare it to plant-based food. And therefore I'm very happy to announce two people who are going to talk in sequence. First, Jeroen Willemsen, he will start, and thereafter Denise de Ridder will reflect on Jeroen's talk. And Jeroen is one of the most active entrepreneurs in the Netherlands when it comes to accelerating the shift towards more plant-based proteins. In 2009, Jeroen founded Oja, producer of plant-based chicken and receiver of the title Most Innovative SME of the Netherlands 2012. And in 2016, Jeroen initiated the Green Protein Alliance, a platform of producers and retailers enabling consumers to restore their protein balance. Directly thereafter, as I indicated, my colleague Professor Denise de Ridder will reflect on Jeroen's talk. And Denise is a professor in psychology at Utrecht University and director of the Self-Regulation Lab. Furthermore, she's co-founder of a Utrecht initiative called Future Food Utrecht, which has the ambition to form a community of all researchers who are interested in food in Utrecht University and tries to link them to relevant stakeholders. May I ask Jeroen to step forward, and the title of his talk will be Pathways to a More Plant-Based Future.
Thank you so much, Rens, for this very kind introduction. It's great being here and to share with you some of my thoughts and experience with respect to this fascinating topic. In this impressive hall, filled with such sustainable intellect, filled with a lot of air, wood, water, some fat, sugar, and quite a lot of protein. Some 7,000 kilograms of protein we have here in this room alone. And as Rand stated, protein is, if not the most important building block of our body. And we have to get a protein injection every day. To live well, some 50 grams protein per day. On a global level, it adds up to almost 400 million tons of protein every day. This is all about protein. As Ren stated, we get our proteins from animals or from plants. But we see a big difference globally, whether it comes to the ratio of the proteins that we consume. And I will for now focus on especially the right side, where we see that in Europe and in the States and in Canada and developed countries, not only we consume too much protein, but also the ratio is totally out of sync. And this is the main issue. We consume too much animal protein, whereas livestock is responsible for 18% of the greenhouse gas emission. 83% of the farmland globally is used for producing feed. For 1 kilogram of beef, we need 15,000 liters of water. But this has not happened overnight. My parents were born just before 1950. I was born in 72. And what I've experienced myself as well is that we have created ourselves a protein paradox. Whereas once we believed that eating much meat and dairy is a sign of welfare, prosperity, a healthy and good life. Now we've created this meat mountain, we're standing on top of it, we can see further, and we see that the opposite is actually true. Natural resources going down, greenhouse gas emission going up, climate change, obesity, other welfare-related diseases. I've taken it to my personal quest to restore the protein balance in one generation, where it has gone wrong in 2 generations. But coming down off that mountain is more easily said than done. Why? Because we love meat. Its tender and juicy structure. Its taste, the crispy sound when you bake it. I think many of us will recognize it. So what if I tell you that this is not animal meat, it's plant meat? It's what I created together with 2 of my companions 10 years back at Wageningen University. And I said, we're not going to call it a meat alternative or a substitute. It's better than the real thing. It tastes better. So it's a meat successor. It's a meat successor. But then the next question came about. How are we going to bring this to the consumer? Because a good product alone will not sell itself. Then I met this man. He smelled the product that I created. He came to my office and he introduced himself. He said, I'm Jaap. Jaap, he said. And I'm the first vegetarian butcher. I said, well, that's interesting. A butcher who is a vegetarian. No, he said, no. I am going to be the largest butcher in the world of any butchers selling only vegetarian meat, plant meat. Okay, well, that's interesting. How are you going to do that? He said, well, that's the thing. I have the idea, I have the brains, I have the creativity, but I don't have the product. Can you help me? I said, yeah, let me help you. I got my launching customer. He ordered 30 tons of my vegetarian chicken. He opened up a store in The Hague, and the rest over the past 10 years is history. I think many of you will know Jaap, and if not, please have a look at the vegetarian butcher. And only last month, Unilever bought the vegetarian butcher. It taught me one very important thing, namely that it's not a product, even of sublime quality. It's not just a product. It's not the multinationals who will catalyze the pathway to a more plant-based living, a way of living. It's these guys. It's the individual. And I wanted to take it as an example. And I translated it also to myself. I call it the personal pathway towards protein rebalancing. This is me. 10 years ago, I said, okay, Jeroen, you are going to run a marathon. And you're going to do it fast. Because changing food habits is not a thing of today and tomorrow. So I started running. Ate a lot of proteins, plant proteins, most of the case. I set myself 2 goals. I wanted to run a marathon within 3 hours, and I wanted to make a noticeable contribution to changing the protein diet. 2 years ago, I ran the marathon of Berlin in 2 hours 55, but the second challenge, I'm not there yet. But fortunately, I'm not alone. Because all around the world, I found there are people like me, or like Jaap. In the Netherlands, we have Mark and Charlotte. In the States, we have Josh and Ethan of Impossible Meat, Just Meat, and Beyond Meat. In France, we have Ivan dealing with algae. In the States, in UK, we have Heather Ann. Many of these people are quite young, 2 exceptions. It's Richard and Bill, or should I perhaps say Sir Richard Branson and Mr. Bill Gates. They're on this picture because they have also seen the light, and they are now investing heavily in meat successor startups. And this woman on top here with the cap, that's Anna-Kaisa. And she's from Sweden. She's created a totally new way of looking at meat successors or meat consumption in general. Look her up. Some people here from Lund, they may have heard about Oomph as a new brand. Now, Sweden is interesting, very interesting. Have a look at this 1-minute video.
Dear Meat, we've had so many good times together, but we have to see each other less often. Our relationship isn't good for the planet. Well, the planet will always make it. It's us humans that suffer. Producing meat releases 35 times more greenhouse gases than producing the same amount of plant-based protein, and it takes 10 times more land. So we have to eat less meat. It won't be easy. We love you, and many of us aren't sure what to cook instead, or if the kids would eat the new food. But it turns out there are lots of tasty, easy to prepare, kid-friendly food without meat. So we can make it if we help each other. Hope you understand.
Hope you understand, dear meat. At least I understood what Coop, a Swedish retailer, is doing here. They're not talking to the world, they're talking to you. They're talking to you, to what's on your plate. And I think that's crucial in beginning to make the change towards a more sustainable and more plant-based diet. There's another way, the political way. And to be honest, I'm skeptical. A lot has been said lately again about meat tax. I truly believe that only if prices would double, that would really be an incentive for not just the happy few, but also the mass to cut down on meat consumption. And then there's the political sensitivity. I don't think many political parties or politicians, we can perhaps ask Diederik as well, ready to have the guts to make this difference. And as consumers, we also generally don't want the politics to determine what we're putting in our mouth, what we're eating. But on the other side, we have to count our blessing. Count on blessings. A few months ago, this report was published by the European Union. The protein strategy, becoming less dependent on the imports of plant proteins from abroad, from outside the EU. I got the opportunity to talk to Mr. Phil Hogan, EU Commissioner for Agriculture, for 1 minute. I'll give you the half-minute version of my pitch. This is what I did. Mr. Hogan, dear Phil, the only way we are going to reach the ambition of becoming less dependent of outside EU protein is not to focus on feed, on the system that we have, but on food. As long as we keep on feeding animal this great power food, in this case soy, to animals and not to humans, we will not reach the ambition. Thank you very much. Okay. Count my blessings. Fortunately, even if it's behind feed, food is now also in the strategy. Long way to go there. It's not for nothing that also in SDG number 12, it is this sequence: consumption and production. Production should follow consumption. Consumption should be leading. It's not production that we have to focus on first, changing consumption. Moving to the end of my presentation. The we all profit pathway. I really like this one because we've already seen health, greenhouse gas emission, climate change, but it's also literally the term of profit. Half a year ago, some scientist says, we have to all make deeply uncomfortable choices. Politicians, consumers, farmers. No! We have the opportunity to make very comfortable choices. We can really live up to new, more healthy standards, create new business models, create new products which are very tasteful. We can reduce healthcare costs. We can reduce the impact of livestock greenhouse emissions. That's the way how I see this challenge. And this is a quote that was picked up by media that I did a few months ago, and I'm still, I think it's very, very valid. Our challenge is to turn a serious business into serious business. Please don't blame me, being an entrepreneur, also emphasizing this topic. Because I think that we do need not just the usual suspects, but also the retailers and other stakeholders, multinationals, to put the money where their mouth is. Yeah. And they can only do so if there's also a little sustainable business. So that's why I created the Green Protein Alliance. I founded it a few years ago. We have a shared ambition. It's all written down in this Green Protein Growth Plan, restoring that balance. These are some of the partners and companies that are associated with it. Some of the usual suspects, but also in Albert Heijn and Jumbo, the two biggest retailers in the Netherlands. And also Unilever has joined us now, just as the Rabobank. They all share this vision, the effect of turning a serious business into serious business. And not just here, but globally, it's happening right now. Whereas 10 years ago, starting my company with this meat successor, I didn't even dare to go to meat producing companies. I said, well, yeah, I have the next generation meat. I didn't even dare to do so. But now, they see the light. And it's not just in America, it's also in New Zealand, where Kraft is now taking a big share also into plant-based food. Or here in the Netherlands, where Hilton Meat has done so. Examples everywhere. And Unilever, as I said. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a thing of the future. The plant-based future is now. And whatever pathway to protein rebalancing you choose, make sure you're a part of it. I'm a part of it. I'm happy when I'm seeing these kinds of quotes. And for the non-Dutch speaking people here, plants are the new cows. IKEA was in the room, eh? Who's from IKEA? Is someone from IKEA? Yeah. Very happy to be in your store, not just for the billies, but also for the food. The veggie dog being even cheaper than the meat version. So the plant dog is cheaper, and it tastes better, so keep up the good work. How about this one? It's like milk, but made for humans. Okay? And then to conclude, this is my daughter. Once she heard that McDonald's was introducing a vegetarian burger, she said, Dad, can we finally go to the McDonald's? Yeah, we can go to the McDonald's. And she really loved it. And credits to McDonald's, because I know they're working on a big protein plan as well. And they have the guts. They dare to call it the Veggie McChicken. Need I say more? Ladies and gentlemen, take your own share in claiming the profit towards a more plant-based future. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you. I'll take the clicker from you. There you go. And if you have a seat there, Professor Denise de Ridder, come and join me over here. Well, great, Jeroen, and we'd like to hear your reflections. Now, you are a professor of psychology, and it makes me wonder if you think it really is individuals who are the ones who are going to move us towards this plant-based future. And what are your reflections on Jeroen's presentation? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Before starting with my reflections, I think as a psychologist, I'm of course interested in individual behavior, but I think it's actually all about context and providing individuals with the right context to behave in a way we want them to. Jeroen, first, thank you for such an inspiring talk. It's an honor and a privilege to reflect on your enthusiastic crusade for a protein-based future. I rarely have the opportunity to talk or to engage with people from private companies as an academic, except for my local grocery shopper. But I have a few remarks. First, what I like in the idea that private companies try to encourage a protein-based future, plant-based proteins, is that they take the initiative that government is not so proactive at the moment, and I think there's an opportunity there because different from government, who tries to engage or sometimes doesn't try to engage citizens with the abstract ideal of sustainable future, I think that giving us the opportunity to connect with concrete products, such as the vegetarian butcher products, is an opportunity. It's easier for consumers to try to imagine how it will be not to eat meat. And I think another advantage is that we can buy this stuff in a store with people whom we know, the cashier, the local supermarket manager, which is more speaking to us than government. And people tend to distrust these messages that are abstract, and it's not so sure why they want us to do. And as you said, that you don't want government in your kitchen and tell you what to eat, but if you can just buy it at the grocery store, it's easier. So that are two advantages, I think, with private companies taking the lead. But I also have some questions. And the first question is, you as a protein crusader, before it was an alliance, you are very dedicated about investing in these type of products. But we all know that private companies, and especially large companies, are not known for their consideration of the common good. And sometimes they are more interested in making profit in the short run. So I wonder, except for these startups and all the people in France and all over the world that are taking these initiatives, can we really trust that once there's not enough profit that we'll keep engaging and investing in this type of products? And also, we are a liberal democracy. Shouldn't we also, should government, and we should encourage them, should take a leading role and do and invest in agenda setting for a sustainable future? So I'm a bit critical about, should we really leave it to the private companies to and that we as consumers rely on this, and should government play a role as well? And then a second question I had was, we all know that I myself, I buy these vegetarian butcher stuff very frequently, as do my colleagues at university, and probably all of you here, but we are the early adopters. And we can afford it financially, ideologically. How about the large part of the population that isn't ready yet for these new type of products? So I wonder, and maybe it's just a matter of time, but I wonder if these private companies are interested in investing more so that it not only remains a niche market, but speaks to larger parts of the population to make a true impact. And especially also, I think it's important that we, as the people who are engaged, do not alienate ourselves from large parts of the population who are not ready yet to make this transition. So that were my reflections.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, now it's over to all of us to have a conversation about this. You've heard some ideas about where this sudden increase in interest in plant-based diets is coming from, the drivers, and how it might become more mainstream. Your thoughts. We have some time to talk about plant-based futures. What do you think? We have a couple of people with microphones at the top here, and we also have a thrown microphone down here. This is the Managing Director of Pathways to Sustainability. We asked him to help us with the throwing. This is Ad van Dommelen. Thank you so much. So who would like to go first? Yes, over here on this side, we'll do a, okay, this is going to be interesting. We're going to be tossing into the future, trying to toss the microphone all the way to the back. And if it doesn't quite get to you, we're going to actually get help from those in between. Ready? Here we go. Yeah. Here it goes. Wonderful, perfect. All right, go ahead. Yes.
I can fully imagine the questions you have, but I think it was also a very convincing story of Jeroen Willemsen. I was wondering to solve or to meet one of the how to solve the problems you mentioned is the very few role models, Richard Branson, Bill Gates, but perhaps would it be helpful to reach other people in society, for instance, to have soccer players using plant protein, because they reach a large audience. They are seen as role models for a large group of society. Is that a feasible idea?
Great. Let's actually take a couple more, and then we're going to come back to Denise de Ridder. So over here, so now it's your chance to toss it over to this side. Oh my gosh, except for we do need to make sure before watching. Luckily, it's padded. Okay, go ahead. Apologies for the those in between, and we'll come up to the top here. I see you up there. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for your interesting talk. My name is Desiree Wijs, and I've been eating plant-based for about 4 years. And something that always comes up is the cost debate. And I think that right now we're really focusing on meat replacements. But it's not so much about replacing meat, but about a different way of eating. So I'm a student, and my groceries are about 120 euros a month, which is super cheap because I don't buy the meat replacers, because I see them as like the steak or something that you wouldn't eat that daily. So I think it's actually really affordable right now if you just invest in eating lentils or beans, or those are super, super cheap, and like not having the money is really not an excuse to not going more to the plant-based future. And actually, maybe the discussion should also be a bit more about that, not really about meat replacement, but about the protein source.
Great, thank you so much. I see there was one behind you already there, and then I see you. So we're going to go here, and then we're going to come up to the top here. So Esme, if maybe we could, yes, right here. So let's start here, here, and then there, and then we're going to come back to the panel. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, completely agree with the
yes, go
speaker.
ahead.
Completely agree with the speaker before me. But aside from that, I also wanted to come back to something that Professor de Ridder said about this being by private companies. What would be a concern on my part is sustainable farming in general, because plant-based proteins are, of course, more sustainable than the meat industry. But would you also be looking at sustainable farming like vertical farming or aquaponics, when that is not necessarily cheap right now, because it is an investment? It might become cheap later on, but seeing as it is a private company, are they willing to make that investment to not just produce, for example, soy is produced rather unsustainably right now with a lot of water waste. So yeah, I was just hoping on your comments on that.
Great, thank you. And then up to the top here. It'll come on, yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Jeroen, I got a question for you. Because you said you were a bit skeptical on the meat tax, while at the same time you also lauded IKEA for having this veggie dog for a cheaper price than the meat version. So could you elaborate on this?
Great. Okay, so we're going to start with this. We might start there with the meat tax. Then I'd love Denise to speak about the role models component. And then let's together address this ways of eating, the protein that's actually happening, and this possible rebound effect around the environmental implications. So start with this meat tax. What's the role, if you would like to see this context shift for the market?
Yeah, thank you for your very interesting question, and a very important topic. You see it everywhere in these questions, prices, costs. And what happens at IKEA is they're actually not putting a tax or an extra price on the meat version. They're cutting down the price for the plant version. So it's a different approach. And what you see here now in the Netherlands, even the last few months, is that the taxes on fruit and vegetable is increasing. So I think that's quite a perverse way of asking the consumers to live more sustainable. So it's the other way around. So I believe more in cutting down the costs or making it more attractive to go for the plant option rather than increasing the prices on meat.
So Denise, this idea of role models playing a critical role in social change.
Role models may be important, but I think it's not that when role models are too far away from the general population, it doesn't work. And for an example, the Netherlands Nutrition Center launched a campaign that males should eat less meat, because generally males eat more meat than women. And these were likable young guys, and but the campaign failed. If you had a look on Twitter, the reactions were very fierce. And they were just, if people feel not connected to the role models cannot change. They can only encourage change when society is ready for change. So it is an accelerator, but for initiation, it doesn't work.
Great, thank you. And Jeroen, this idea that we are focusing now on the protein itself, but maybe we should be focusing on our ways of eating and the cost possibilities of that, the affordability of that, mostly also because proteins, soy proteins, might have a rebound effect where they might have a large environmental impact as well. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, and in that respect, I would like to comment also on the remark that this young lady made, because I very much agree with what you say, and it sounds perhaps a little strange coming from my mouth, but I truly believe that the meat successor that I created 10 years ago is in fact a transition product. It's only a product for those who think that the jump back towards lentils and pulses is too big. Yeah, so it is. I hope the products are no longer required or needed in 20, 30 years. So I fully agree with you, and I'm very happy that companies like Hak and Bonduelle and also Boon in the Netherlands are really stimulating again to really start consuming that protein sources that you're talking about. And then with respect to the
yes, the impact of soy and the
yeah.
current, right, this whole idea that we're, the private companies might not have the incentive to think about the larger picture. So right now, soy production, very high water intensive, but also would we be thinking about vertical farming, aquaponics, which have their own ecological implications?
It's all about where we are now and where do we want to go, where we can go. I agree. Soy production, legume production costs water. But compared to animal production, it's cutting down by more than 70, 80%. And if we would in fact change our diet, then we would need as much soy. Europe alone would be enough to produce more the plant protein that we would need. So it's a matter of reference. Are we sticking to the reference that in fact now we need a lot of water to produce a lot of soy? Yeah, but we need all of that soy because we still eat so much meat and dairy. So I think it's good to start looking different at this whole ecosystem instead of the reference situation that we have now.
Great. So I'm going to take that one last question at the back here, and then I'm going to ask just for a final remark, just something to leave us with. Go ahead. And you might need to yell it. Go ahead. Great. So does it come back down to the consumer when we're affected by common agricultural policy and just the context of large-scale dairy production in the Netherlands, for example? This might be a great way to end because both of you have an opinion on that. Would you like to start?
That's okay. I think now there's too much emphasis on the consumer, that consumers should change. But I think there's only an opportunity for change when there are enough products and there's enough encouragement. And you cannot just make individuals responsible when the context isn't right. And I think in the triangle of consumers, industry and government, I'm most interested in how industry and government, how their responsibilities lie. Except for, of course, if you empower consumers, they can make a call. But I think the lead, the context should be provided by government and industry.
Great, Jeroen.
It's all about making the sustainable choice the easy choice. And in that respect, I truly believe that industry has a very important role in that. Making it more easy for consumers to make the sustainable choice, not just by means of product, but also by means of positioning or promoting. I think that's very relevant. So, and that in fact does place the consumer central, being very obvious or indirectly by means of nudging. So I stick to my point. I think consumers and industry should really lead this pathway to sustainability. And what we see now already happening a little bit in also the Dutch politics. We have now Minister Schouten, who's created this kringlooplandbouw or circular agriculture system, which very carefully also makes the connection between consumption. It's a first step. It's going to be a long route, but the more she is also convinced of the win-win-win, the win for health, the win for animal welfare, the win for new business models, the win for farmers, the win for our planet, and also the win for a sustainable business model again, then I think we'll come there, we'll get there.
Great. Well, join me in thanking Jeroen and Denise for this great conversation. Thanks to all of you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.